my thesis is very simple, and I start with these three premises. First of all, the consumer has already discovered the connected world, and in particular, the social network. However, retailers, banks, service providers generally have not organized things in a way that really maximizes this connected world. So when people say to me, where's growth? There's massive growth out there yet, still to come by just connecting the dots. The other key point is data. Masses of data. Most businesses, whether in the cloud or not, have got anything from 1 to 10 petabytes of data, but not enough insights. And it's how do you turn the data into insights that really matters. And as Mark Twain once said, news of my death is grossly exaggerated. I still believe that stores will be around forever, but they certainly have to repurpose themselves and genuinely develop advocacy and relationships with consumers as opposed to just treating them in a transactional manner. So those are the sorts of things I'm just going to talk about today. I always start with what keeps a CEO awake at night. Well, it used to keep me awake anyway. And I always break things down into the sort of what's and the hows. Most CEOs are always worried about where's my top line growth coming from. So that's a critical one that's always out there. How do I keep growing my business? But growing it in a manner that's profitable. So I'm not just taking money, but I'm also making money for my investors, my employees, and my shareholders. How do I develop a results-driven organization that's passionate about innovation? You know, Best Buy, we had 280,000 employees, and every one of them was the innovation director, every single one. And we inverted the pyramid of the organization to do that, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And the other key thing is, how does technology help me? I used to look at 300 to 400 ideas a month, both in my life as a managing partner of Accenture's retail practice globally, but also, you know, in Best Buy and also in Marks and Spencer. There were so many new ideas, and so how do we actually filter them? And one of the key things was this simple hopper of joy, where first of all, what was in the best interests of consumers. So we looked at everything through the lens of the customer. And if it didn't do something to improve that experience, we didn't do it, even if it added to the P&L. It was always about what are we doing, looking through the lens of consumers. So those are some of the hows I'm going to touch on. There isn't time to touch on all of these today. But the other key point on the left-hand side there is, what's my brand famous for today and tomorrow, particularly as we move from the analog world to the digital world, and we start to use digital marketing as opposed to the old print press and TV. So those are some of the things that keep us awake at night that I'm going to try and address. So I guess you can simply say we're into what I call a more world, more complex, more competitive, more sophisticated, but as a result of that, more opportunity. There's never been a time when there's been so much opportunity out there as there is today. Masses of opportunity. So when people talk about, you know, growth is bottoming out and so on, don't believe it. Every single day, so there's new ideas that come along and generate different ways of improving the market, improving customers' lots, etc. So there's huge opportunities out there. You know, we keep forgetting that the web's been around for about 19 years. But it's only in the last 10 years that it really has flown. And sometimes things take a little bit of time to develop. And the key point to remember here, I think, is around brands. You'll see, I mean, if I put up a slide now and showed you the number of retailers that don't exist in the UK or don't exist in the US in the last 10 years, it runs into double sides of A4. You know, several hundreds of retailers have disappeared, primarily because good brands are getting stronger and the weaker ones get weaker. And it's really about maximizing lifetime value of that relationship with customer, not each transaction. And too many retailers still focus, and big service providers and banks particularly, focus on a transaction and don't look enough at the lifetime value of a consumer. And unfortunately, we all know that to our costs. Understanding change, and what I'm going to lead you to here is about redefinition. Now, this is a model that we developed in conjunction with an individual about 24, 25 years ago, and we called it the EST model. There was a number of ESTs out there already, and we put a lot of work into it, and we've developed these very simple ESTs. And it's not many years ago where you had to be dominant in one of these ESTs: easiest, cheapest, quickest, biggest, largest. And if you were dominant in more than one, you sort of fell into the land of mediocrity. You know, Apple today is not a hardware provider, it's a content provider, and it provides some of the greatest content that's easy to access through the lens of the customer. It's very, very focused, you know, on that. If you take Zara, it's the hottest, and they stay very focused. But the web has enabled people to sort of disintermediate a lot of these things. And so the challenge now is still, though, what am I going to be famous for? But it's also about what am I going to be famous through multi-channels. Many retailers started to look at not just developing, and if you look at the sort of horizontal axis here, developing products, own brands, exclusive brands, then they started to develop channels, then they started to go off into different geographies. And the really good retailers today are sort of driving a line up the middle and really focusing on lifetime value, lifetime experience, and service. It's about how do I really start to develop service. You know, one of the best retailers in the world, or two I should say, one is Nordstrom in the US, which still outperforms the market generally, and the other one is John Lewis. You know, 29, 30 stores, and yet it dominates the domestic textile market in the UK. 26, 27% of various categories of market share. Phenomenal business, and it's all about paranoia around service. So it's about redefining what I stand for as a business. And this is a classic example of one of the greatest changes in society. If you go back to 1955, the ship on the top there was the very first container ship. It carried 68 containers. And that was an old World War II cargo boat in essence, but converted through a very bright idea. The ship on the bottom carries 19,000 containers. Now just imagine what that does to the economics of supply chain. And I think we're going through that same paradigm shift in terms of how we manage retail and our interactions with consumers. And those are the sort of changes that really need to redefine what it is we stand for. Technology. Colossus is in the picture here. This is the first ever computer, operational in 1944, based at Bletchley, the home of the code breakers. And I'm disclosing the fact I'm a trustee of the National Museum of Computing based in Bletchley. This is the world's first computer. And 10 of them were operational by the end of the Second World War. And all of those in government will tell you that this probably took 2 to 3 years off of the length of the war and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. And if you ever get a chance to go there, you'll see signals that were encrypted and written personally by Adolf Hitler and many, many other people. And it was covered by the Official Secrets Act in 1960 before anybody even knew it existed. The iPad at the bottom there has more computing power than those 10 Colossuses combined. But that's how the powers of things have changed. But that's how technology is helping and will continue to bring about change. Power in computing doubles every 13, 14 months. And that's not stopping or going away. And this is the old proverbial haystack. When I was a very simple store manager and running M&S's food division, we talked about real generalities when it came to consumers. And we always used to talk about it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Well, today, we can actually find the needle in the haystack. We actually know so much about consumers. In the US, there are 237 million people that shop every day. And if you take every axis of data that's out there in the public domain and amalgamate that, you can actually really track what people's behaviors are real time. And one of the companies I'm chairman of, Reunify, based in the US, based in San Francisco, does just that. We also use missile tracking technology because, you know, if you're tracking a plane with a missile, you have to keep doing this with the radar. Otherwise, they send a nasty missile down to blow the radar scanner up, so you have to keep blinking. Well, we use this missile tracking technology, or the idea, to actually look at human behavior and actually foresee how long people will stay with a retailer, stay with a sports club. So the amount of information that's out there in the public domain now, without sort of breaching any confidentialities of any human being, because we should never do that, really enables us to do a much, much better job than we have done in the past in terms of using insights to really do a good thing for customers. And the real sort of way of summarizing this for me is around change. You know, if you go back to the 90s, back to that point in time, you had all the time in the world to make very simple decisions. Today, you've got no time to make very, very complex decisions. So there's no point in operating the company in the same way. And one of the best things we ever did at Best Buy in the sort of 2003-04 was actually to decentralize the organization. We inverted the pyramid. So Brad and I, who were the co-CEOs of the organization, were the least most important people in the organization, and the most important people were the customers and the people that touched the customers. And we empowered those people to really change the SOP, the standard operating procedure, and challenge what we did. And as a result of that, we killed Circuit City and we became the biggest electronics retailer in the world. Unfortunately, retiring in, and I've retired a couple of times in my time, but retiring in 2009, since then things have gone the other way. So one is now going back to try and help them resurrect, but it was all about the culture. The point here is you have to run your organizations differently if you really want to respond in live and real time to consumer behavior in your business, whatever business you have. Operating in traditional hierarchical ways is not working in the way that it should or used to. I'm not going to go through too much of this, but we carried out a massive piece of research last year, 15,000 consumers across the Western world, if you like, but also we did a lot of it in Asia and the UAE. And it was astonishing how similar the responses were. You know, people always talk about different maturity levels of markets, but the reality is consumers' expectations, whether you're in China, Vietnam, Turkey, Scotland, or my country, Wales, they're the same. It's just the ability to take advantage of it. So the opportunities are massive, but you need to look through the lens of the consumer. But there's, as I've said, masses of information out there. And the astonishing thing that came out of this research was over 40% of people across all age groups are going online to buy products from the place where they saw it in the physical store. But they were using online and they were using their own time to do it. So don't run away with the idea that people are just showrooming in one place and buying in another. That is not true and it's not factually correct. It only happens when you, the retailer, are not providing something that you should. And then you get a different response. But that's got nothing to do with consumers. That's to do with the way in which you as businessmen, us as businessmen, are operating. Showroom is increasing, and it will continue to increase, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. And I think it forces retailers to think differently about how they operate their stores. And also offering not just product, but services. And this is where, you know, Amazon has done a wonderful job in what it does. But it can never, ever beat a store-based retailer that's online, because you have the opportunity, if you've got a fixed asset, to actually show consumers how to use that product in a way that Amazon can't. You can use technology at home, you can, you know, look at, you know, dressing up and so on, you know, using your screens, but it's not the same as walk-out working where you're showing someone what to do. And so we believe showrooming is actually a good thing. The other key point that came out of this research was that the online sales world would do so much better if the product was available. 90% of consumers said that one of the major reasons why they didn't buy was the product wasn't available when they wanted it. And that's one of the challenges for retailers, and the way in which supply chains are still being built not designed to go straight to consumers' homes, but going to deconsolidation centers and warehouses, which ends up you touch the stuff 5 times instead of deconsolidation and straight to the consumer's home, which is now starting to happen. And Amazon are investing massively to do just this. And that's, again, a good thing if you look through the lens of the consumer. The other key point I want to make is that, if you look at the purchases, whether it's store-based or online influenced, store purchases still outweigh those online. But more and more purchases are now influenced on, using the web or using social network. There are about 250 million emails a minute. There are 5 times that quantity per minute in terms of the use of the social network. And yet very few retailers are using the social arena to actually help, not purchase, but help influence consumers in the way in which they shop product. And I see this continuing. In fact, I predict that in the next 2 to 3 years, we will stop talking about channels and we will just talk about lifetime value of a consumer, because consumers don't care about the channel. They're not interested. They want the same treatment, whether it's online, catalog, store. They just want one consistent approach to life. And they want to trust the brand to do it. And yet too many organizations are still structured. I run the online business, I run the store business, and no one is looking sufficiently, holistically at the customer experience. And that comes out time and time again. But unfortunately, some of these things, as the previous speaker said, take a long time to break down. And this is one thing that if you look through the lens of the consumer, they'll tell you very clearly, we don't care, we don't even use the word channel, we want lifetime experience. And so I think in 2 to 3 years' time, the word channel would disappear. I also hope we'll drop the E in e-commerce and just talk about commerce, because a part of the problem is we keep differentiating and calling it e-commerce when it's actually all about the customer experience. That's just a view. The other interesting thing, the customer expects everything to talk to one another. And back in 2002 in Palo Alto, and I'm going back a long time now, in essence, in Accenture's research lab, we had abilities there for the kettle to talk to your phone, for the fridge to talk to your car, and for your wardrobe to talk to your car. So when you're driving in your car, it could tell you, you could switch the kettle on. It could tell you how much milk and bread and whatever you had in the fridge, and it also able to tell you when it was out of life. The only problem was we had a real problem cost engineering it. But those ideas have been around for a long time, and they're only now starting to come to fruition. So the opportunities for product development and R&D are massive. Consumers love this stuff. And it's also good for them to know, about keeping lives. How long has the stuff been in the fridge? How fresh is it? So if you're a retailer that focuses on fresh, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to really accentuate that point of difference. And the other key point here really is about, from a technology perspective, and that's why it's disappointing when you look at the struggle that Sony and people like this are having, is they're still not connecting products in a way that consumers want them to be connected. And they're still just turning out products instead of looking at solutions on how people use things. And having worked with these guys long enough, it's not an easy door to break down, unfortunately. But this is a wonderful opportunity. And the car becomes a great location to do more and more communication with you as customers. And there's all sorts of R&D going on now where you can, the car can tell you if someone's entering your house, what your energy levels are in the house, etc., and you can adjust it. There are R&D developments now that will enable you in a couple of years' time to do all of that from your car. It's possible technically today, but unfortunately it has to be cost engineered, or people have to be brave enough to actually push those ideas. The other key thing to say is that the more customers shop you across different channels, if they use more than 2 channels, online or store, they're 86% more profitable than they are if they shop in 1 channel. And that figure's actually greater by category, but broadly that's what it looks like. And whether you're a Tesco loyalty card holder or an M&S card holder or a Best Buy loyalty card holder, the facts are broadly the same, between 70 and 86%. So it really pays to operate, in the multi-channel, omni-channel world. The only one thing to say about this particular point in technology is that if you're not investing in technology, guess what? All these guys are. And it's arguable to say that a lot of this is actually catch-up because insufficient investment went into the online world in the early 80s, late 80s. And there's a lot of investment going in now, which is one of the reasons why Europe is outperforming the US for the very first time in growth online. Massively outperforming, primarily because there's greater levels of standardization, there are greater levels of protocol. I mean, there's not a common standard in the mobile arena in the US, and I know, having operated in that world for many years, it's horrific, the fact that there are multiple technology standards. In Europe, there's one, which enables everybody to operate much more simply, but also more cost effectively. But the key point here is investment. This other piece of research we did, we talked to 15,000 consumers, we angled all sorts of questions, and the outflows of those questions came to these words. And the bigger the word, the more this came out. And consumers really want to be able to shop across multi-channel. They don't use the word multi-channel, but when you talk to consumers about how they want to spend their time and money, they want to be able to buy things when they're in the office, they want it delivered to the office or delivered to the petrol station. They really want that capability. And one of the countries that's really leading the way with this is South Africa, because the technology in that country has been really well developed over the years. In fact, the number of mobile phones per head in South Africa has been one of the highest in the world for many, many years because of security issues. And people have done the paradigm shift and not put, hard lines into houses. Everybody has phones, and it's only been surpassed in terms of quantum by China. But the reality is that's because there's over 1 billion people, and South Africa hasn't quite got there yet in terms of numbers. But if you look at per head of population, South Africa does a phenomenal job in this particular arena, and probably more advanced than many. But the key point here is the more you start to look at your business, as a single entity, even though you might be operating in different types of channels, the better, because consumers love it. And by the way, there's more money to be made. Looking a little bit now at some of the technologies, this company called Reunify, I've disclosed the fact I am the chairman of this and one of the co-founders. We use all sorts of technology to predict consumer and human behavior. We don't use any data that isn't available in the public domain. There's so much out there, you don't need more of it. It's about turning that data into streams of insights. And we're able to predict, and we're doing this, I can't mention the name of the company, but there's a very, very big sports company in the US, all the training and people keeping fit and doing exactly what I don't do every single day. And we're able to predict, that the average time that people spend in those clubs over a period is about 18 months. And towards the end of that, if you don't do something different, they leave. And there's that 3-month window, you have something to do. And where we've actually used this information, we've been able to drag it out to 2.5 years. So we know that this works, and we're now using it in a major retailer in the UK, but using this data to really start to help retailers to focus on consumer behavior before it affects them in a negative way. And Reunify does this in conjunction with another entity called Lighthouse, which uses your security cameras as well, not in terms of facial recognition because that's a bit of a problem, but it uses those two capabilities and missile tracking technology and various others, and it's very, very advanced. But it's great stuff, and it gives you very simple responses. So this is just one of the things that's out there. The other company that I'm a part of, we floated the company on the London Stock Exchange 4 weeks ago, called Eagle Eye. This has unique IP. It enables you to purchase, using your mobile phone, but that's not unique. But what it does is it's about coupons. Coupon fraud in the US and Europe runs at about 17%. And you've got the FMCG world always arguing with the retailers and the food guys about how much was actually used and how much was fraudulent, etc. So there's massive amount of vouchers. This actually digitizes them and personalizes every voucher to every customer so that when they go in the store and they see something, that automatically gets downloaded. It's passed back to the CRM team so that they know what the consumer's buying and not buying, but it also automatically deducts it from the till. And it's unique IP, and it's IP across the world, and it's the only company that has that ability to do it. And we've now got 70% of retailers in the UK, about 20% in Europe, and we're now headed to the US with a very major client that we can't talk about. But Marks & Spencer's using it very aggressively and using it very positively in their food area. I wish they would use it in the non-food area, but they're certainly using it in the food area. The other point I touched on, is the store area. When someone goes online, you know exactly what they do. You know when they come into the checkout, you know if they actually abandon the checkout, you know what they buy, they don't buy, etc. When someone comes in your store, it's a black hole. They walk into the store, you just about know them if you know them. You know they're there, but that's it. You don't know anything about them until they walk out. So part of what Eagle Eye, Reunify, and so on are doing using this technology is to be able to track behavior in stores, and we can also use facial recognition in many places, but we switch it off in also many. But we've got this going on in 2 very big departmental store groups, and as a result, they've actually readjusted their staffing levels, they've realigned the space allocation, but more importantly, they've actually started to do much, much more training around their employees, which is still the secret sauce. But it's astonishing how little retailers still know about consumers when they're in the store versus how much they know when they're online. That has to change if retailers are going to really make a difference through their boxes. And that's what they have to do, and that's why I think retail and stores are going to be around forever, because they will, over time, get to grips with that. I'm not going to talk about that. In terms of supply chain, just simply to say, and I do a lot of work with retailers across the world, some very big ones, who are still looking at supply chains that come where the product is sourced and purchased and built, in China, Taiwan, Europe, wherever, into consolidation centers, shipped, then put into deconsolidation centers in the UK, then out to warehouses, and then out to stores, and then out to customers. Instead of saying, we know what this customer's bought, let's just ship it straight when it comes to the deconsolidation center, straight to the consumer's home. You've reduced the touch time by 3, and that's all cost, but more importantly, you've done what the consumer wants, and that is get it to them when they want it, not when you can do it. And that's why Amazon are investing so heavily. There are 2 big fashion retailers that I'm working with in Europe who are doing exactly the same thing, and the difference in speed to market is colossal, and there's also serious points of margin in it as well. But it's astonishing to me the number of people that are still building supply chains and the technology. And I talk about Oracle, people like that here, who are still building technology that does it the old way instead of the paradigm shift that has to take place, which is what Amazon is driving like mad. This is just a very simple model in order to start to rethink the overall processes. And starting first of all with what's my customer strategy, then what's my brand, how does my brand satisfy that, how does my product satisfy it, and building up this contact strategy, and then how does that appeal. It's astonishing to me today that again, with customers now having so much choice, where the balance of power has now changed from manufacturers and retailers and is firmly in the hands of the consumer, where it should always be, still not thinking enough about consumer and customer strategies. I mean, this is really what makes the difference. And it's astonishing too how many organizations are still, here's the buying team, here's the marketing team, instead of looking at silos around different types of customer and bringing all of those disciplines together to make better quality decisions in much nimbler, faster time. And if you start to get into, and have the privilege, as I've done for many years, into those really leading fashion companies, that's how they work. They break down those old silos, and they're really focused on speed to market and doing the right thing for the customer. And so they're reorganized around customers. There are approximately 4 or 5 major customer segments in every market. You usually get up to 7. I mean, Oxford Street's, you know, one on its own, if you like, because of the number of people that pass through there. But there's normally 4 to 5. And it's not difficult to do this and structure your organization to be much, much nimbler, faster in making decision making than what it is or what it was. But that's the way the market's going, and those really strong brands are doing more and more of that. And this is where one has to again start to think about, you know, metrics. I worked with a retailer recently, and I looked at all of his processes, and I went into a massive warehouse. This was about a 350,000 square foot, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week fashion warehouse. Here's the buyers and merchandisers charged with developing great product, wonderful quality, great dress appeal. The warehouse had an incentive program that maximized the amount of product that they could get in the stillage. So there's these stillages, and they were literally standing on the lids of these stillages to maximize how much product went in. Guess what that did to the product? But that's how the different parts of the organization were lined up. And instead of looking at the end-to-end process, they were looking at it in piecemeal. And the incentive should have been based upon the quality and speed to the end as opposed to the individual elements. And this is a big retailer too. So it's really about, you know, looking at it and saying, you know, is it a store sale? Is it an online sale? And the more you break that down to being it's a customer sale wherever it comes in, the more you start to break some of the fiefdoms down. And again, good retailers are starting to do this and doing this at pace. I guess the only thing that I would sort of summarize here is that I think it's about, tomorrow's world is about having customers that are your advocates. The better your brand is towards them and your employees, because your secret sauce, even in this technology world, are your employees. They are still, and they become more and more, your secret sauce. And the better trained they are, and the more you take the mundane away and give them, and use the technology to give them more time, face time with customers, the better you will be, and customers will become your advocates. If you make mistakes, your customers will forgive you because they know you're trying hard. But if you don't have that level of trust and advocacy, you know, you're going to go the way of the dinosaur. And the other key point, I think, is around really providing a differentiated experience. You know, at the end of the day, no matter how good technology is, product is still king. But it's not just about product, it's also about services. You know, one of the things that we recognized in Best Buy when we were doing about 37 billion, and we were still the #1 in the US, but not in Canada where we wanted to be, and also, we developed a service brand. We started this little business that was going already with about 6 people called Geek, and we made it the #1 service brand in America. You know, today it's influencing about 16 billion of sales just in one company, and it does about 3 billion through its own P&L. When I bought Carphone Warehouse in the UK, you know, back in 2004, we brought Geek over, changed the name, but that Geek service brand now is permutating what it's doing and is making such a difference, because it isn't just about product, it's also about service, particularly in the technology world, but literally everywhere. And so it's critical to have that real point of difference. Seamless organization, we've talked enough about that. Developing leading edge capability, but not too leading edge so you fall off the cliff. You know, let someone else do that for you. But as I say, product is still king, and innovation, innovation, innovation. And listening to the early speaker, one of the things that really helps a CEO is getting over the message that in the same way you have to celebrate success, you also have to not chastise for failure. Too many organizations, people are frightened to change because they're worried about failing. And if they fail, they're worried about losing their job or being demoted or not getting an increase. If people start to see in an organization, well, actually, it's okay here to come up with an idea and try it. And if it didn't work, okay. I noticed that people didn't get fired. So more and more people have confidence, and they will come forward with new ideas. And that's something one has to do. I don't say celebrate failure, but certainly don't fire people for it. But it becomes really important if you want to drive innovation through the business. And finally, the technology, I think, is the agent of change. So if your CIO isn't a change agent, change him. Because technology isn't in a black box. Technology is for everybody. And the days when CEOs can leave it to the CIO are over. I know I was a CIO and a CEO at the same time. I kept the role because I was worried that the CIO I had would he was Mr. No. No, that's not possible. No, not today. Can't be done. So I said, bugger that. I'm going to stay as the CIO as well until the SEC started to complain about the amount of roles one was doing. But the fact is, CIOs are the agents of change. And their job is to work with the users of the company to bring new technology and ideas to them to help them run the company more effectively, do a better job for consumers, and also release the energy that employees have so that they can spend more time with customers. So it's vital that that's what his role is, not just technology. And finally, staying the same is not an option. Otherwise, you go the way of this guy, although he did last about 50 billion years, from what I understand. So it's not a bad lifetime, I guess. But the fact is, we are in this era now of change. And change isn't something to be frightened of. Change is something you should absorb. And if you absorb change, and it's not easy. And when you're an old person like me, it's never easy to change. But you have to keep changing. And the nice thing is that the more you surround yourself with bright young people of all genders, the more you start to realize that every single day you learn something. And the more you do that and absorb that, the more people see of that, the better you will be. And the final point, as a leader, if you walk in a room and there's a deathly silence and you sap energy, maybe you're in the wrong job. If you walk in the room and create energy, maybe you're in the right job. And at that, I'll say thank you very much for your time.